Welcome once again to the Holy Land Path. Today we are looking at a 2,000-year-old lump of charcoal.
Yeah, it literally looked like a burnt cigar for decades.
Exactly.
Right.
For 46 years, it just sat in a climate-controlled vault in Jerusalem, totally unreadable. If you even breathed on it too heavily, it would just crumble into dust.
Which is terrifying for a conservator, honestly.
Right. Yet today, you are going to find out exactly how a medical CT scanner, the exact same machine used in hospitals to detect cancer, was actually able to peer inside that solid block of ash and read the precise, unchanged words of the book of Leviticus.
It just is one of the most staggering intersections of ancient tragedy and modern ingenuity that we have ever seen, and it is a profound joy to be sharing it with you.
Yeah, it really is.
Because there's something deeply anchoring about unearthing the physical realities of the biblical world. It takes our faith, which is, often so focused on the spiritual and the unseen, and it grounds it firmly in historical bedrock. So today's journey through our sources is going to be incredibly special. It's specifically designed for you as we walk these ancient paths together.
And we really do consider you the third person sitting right here at this table with us. It's an intimate conversation as we uncover the footsteps of the Lord in his land.
I love that. So what is our mission for today?
Well, our mission for this deep dive is to examine a fascinating stack of recent archaeological discoveries. And it all culminates in an unprecedented exhibition of what is, without a doubt, the most important biblical manuscript ever found.
The Dead Sea Scrolls.
Exactly. We have sources ranging from daily news reports and academic linguistic journals to highly technical museum conservation archives. We are going to extract the most important insights, the how and the why behind the headlines, so you can see exactly how the pieces fit together.
And as we navigate these incredibly diverse sources, we're going to trace a very specific, dynamic spiritual theme.
Right, our lesson of the week.
Exactly. Our lesson of the week for this deep dive is faithfulness.
Oh, that's a good one.
We are going to explore God's absolute, unwavering faithfulness in preserving his word across millennia. We will look at the remarkable, almost incomprehensible faithfulness of the ancient scribes in transmitting that word.
The dedication they had is just unreal.
It really is. And we will see how modern science and high-tech archaeology are actively validating the absolute reliability of biblical prophecy. It's a journey designed to strengthen your heart and your confidence in the biblical text.
The contrast in the source material we have today is just staggering. I mean, to give you a roadmap of where we are heading, we're going to look at a rare ancient coin quietly washing up on a modern Mediterranean beach.
Revealing the bustling economic engine of the ancient world.
Yeah, exactly. Then we are going to travel to the lowest, harshest desert on Earth to look at a shepherd boy casually throwing a stone into a dark cave.
Sparking a global treasure hunt.
Right. And finally, as we mentioned, we will dive into the algorithms and x-rays that are currently reading the unreadable.
It is a remarkable synthesis of the ancient dirt and the cutting-edge digital sphere. But, before we delve into the biblical texts themselves, we really need to set the stage.
We had the context.
Precisely. If we want to understand how and why these texts were preserved, we must first look at the historical, geopolitical, and economic world of the Holy Land right around the time these ancient prophecies were being lived out and recorded.
The broader context helps us understand the reality is the biblical era, right? It strips away the myth and replaces it with tangible history.
I completely agree. Which brings us to our first source.
Right, the beach discovery. It's a recent and frankly very surprising discovery from the Ashdod beach on the Mediterranean coast of Israel.
Yeah, tell us about Avi.
So there's this man named Avi Zafrak. He is the deputy director of the beaches division for the city of Ashdod. Now, normally his job involves, managing lifeguards, overseeing beach cleanups, helping tourists find lost keys.
Or maybe a dropped pair of sunglasses in the sand.
Exactly. But during a routine morning scan of the beach, his eye caught something unusual. He stumbled upon a rare 2,500-year-old coin.
The sheer improbability of this find is what first catches the attention of archaeologists. I mean, the Israel Antiquities Authority immediately brought this coin in for examination.
And what did they find?
They determined it was minted in the city of Salamis, located on the eastern coast of the island of Cyprus. And this was right around the mid-5th century BCE.
So to put that date firmly into our biblical timeline, this is the Persian period.
Yes, roughly the time of Ezra and Nehemiah.
Wow. So this is the era when the Jewish exiles were returning from Babylon, mandated by King Cyrus. They were attempting to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem and reestablish the temple amidst immense local opposition and economic hardship.
Exactly. So we have a returning population trying to rebuild their nation. What does a single coin from Cyprus found on a beach tell us about their world?
Well, let's look at the physical object itself. It's a metal coin weighing exactly 11 grams, which classifies it as a siglos.
Right, a very specific denomination.
On one side, it features the image of a crouching ram. On the reverse side, there is a ram's head, accompanied by a laurel branch and some ancient Cypriot syllabic script.
It's heavily detailed.
Yeah, and when I read this, I tried to put myself in the shoes of the person who dropped it. Imagine reaching into the pocket of a heavy winter coat you bought at a thrift store.
Oh, I love this analogy.
And deep in the lining, you find a handful of heavy foreign currency. Maybe some old French francs, a Soviet ruble, or Italian lira. Instantly, that tiny, inert object tells a dynamic story.
It absolutely does.
It tells a story of travel, of borders crossed, of maritime trade routes, and of deep economic connections. Finding this Cypriot coin in the sand at Ashdod tells us that the land of Israel wasn't an isolated religious bubble.
Not at all.
It was intimately and dynamically connected to the broader Mediterranean world during the Persian era.
That is a phenomenal way to look at it. Artifacts are essentially crystallized moments of human interaction. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, there is a specific, microscopic, physical detail about this coin that grounds the biblical era in concrete, verifiable history.
Oh, right, the metallurgy.
Yes, Yaniv David Levy, who is a senior coin expert at the Antiquities Authority, noted a brilliant and unexpected detail during the laboratory analysis. The coin is not solid silver.
Wait, really?
It is a base metal coin that has been deliberately silver-plated.
Now we have to ask why that matters. Why would a major economic power like the city of Salamis in Cyprus go through the complex metallurgical process of plating a coin rather than just minting it in pure silver?
It's a great question.
My immediate thought when I read that was forgery. Were they dealing with ancient counterfeiters trying to pass off cheap metal as precious silver?
That is exactly what one might suspect, and counterfeiting certainly existed, but the historical records and broader archaeological context point to something much more systemic.
What was going on?
Historical and geological records indicate that there was a severe, documented silver shortage on the island of Cyprus during this specific period in the 5th century BCE.
Ah, so an actual supply chain issue.
Exactly. The silver mines were either depleted or access to foreign silver was cut off due to geopolitical conflicts. Remember, this is the era of the massive Greco-Persian Wars. The empire was in absolute turmoil.
Wow. So the government itself was essentially cutting corners on the currency because of a widespread economic crisis.
Yes.
They were actively devaluing their own money to keep the economy moving.
Precisely. They were officially minting plated coins to maintain trade volume despite the lack of raw silver bullion. They needed the economy to function, they needed to pay soldiers and merchants, so they adapted.
That is fascinating.
This tiny, seemingly insignificant detail of metallurgy completely validates the complex geopolitical and economic realities of the 5th century BCE. It shows us an interconnected Mediterranean economy dealing with supply chain issues and inflation, much like we do today.
And how did it end up perfectly intact on a beach in Israel?
That is the other fascinating layer. Coins of this size and value from the Persian period were very rarely used whole in local markets in the Levant.
Really? How did they use them?
Often, they were literally cut into smaller pieces with a chisel. This is a practice archaeologists call hack silver or hacked silver.
Okay, because they didn't trust the face value of the coin?
Exactly, because coins weren't fully trusted, especially if people suspected they were plated merchants would weigh the silver on a scale. They would hack a coin in half to make exact change based on weight.
Oh, wow. So finding a whole one is weird.
Finding a completely intact, unhacked siglos on the coast is exceedingly rare. It strongly suggests it was dropped by a wealthy merchant, a diplomat, or a sailor arriving directly from Cyprus.
Before they could even spend it.
Right, perhaps before they even had a chance to enter the local markets of Ashdod to trade it. It paints a vivid, bustling picture of the international world that Ezra and Nehemiah were navigating.
They weren't rebuilding Jerusalem in a vacuum.
Exactly. They were operating on the edge of a highly globalized, economically turbulent Persian empire.
That economic turbulence and creeping foreign influence is a massive theme here. That Ashdod coin shows a highly globalized, cosmopolitan coastal world.
And not everyone liked that.
Right. It was exactly this kind of creeping Hellenistic and foreign influence centuries later that drove purist, deeply devoted Jewish sects to completely reject cosmopolitan society.
They wanted nothing to do with it.
They looked at the corruption, the foreign money, the political compromises of the coastal cities and even Jerusalem, and they said, no, we are leaving.
They fled the trade hubs.
Yes, they fled to the extreme isolation of the desert to protect their purity and, most importantly, to protect their sacred texts. Which brings us perfectly from the bustling Mediterranean coast to the quiet, arid, and frankly extreme environment of the lowest, driest point on Earth.
The caves of Qumran.
Caves of Qumran.
The transition is profound. We move from the noise of international commerce to the absolute silence of the Judean desert. This isolation brings us to the core of our theme today, the miraculous preservation of the Word.
Because it is not an easy place to live.
No, the environment of the Dead Sea is hostile to human life, but it is the perfect incubator for the preservation of organic material.
The story of how these scrolls were found is almost legendary, but diving into the primary sources details it in a way that feels incredibly visceral. We are in the year 1947.
A very tense year.
Very. You have two Bedouin shepherds, Muhammad ad-Dib and Juma, from the Tamir tribe. To understand this, you have to understand the landscape. The Judean desert isn't just sandy dunes.
It's brutal.
It is a jagged, unforgiving landscape of sheer limestone cliffs, plunging canyons and blistering heat that can easily exceed 110 degrees Fahrenheit.
And they are just out there.
They are out in this brutal terrain, scrambling over rocks, searching for a stray goat. One of them, frustrated and trying to scare the goat out of a hiding place, casually picks up a stone and throws it into a small, dark, narrow cave opening high up on a cliff face.
Just a completely random act.
But instead of a bleat from a goat, he hears something that makes no sense in the middle of the desert. He hears the unmistakable sharp sound of shattering pottery.
Just imagine that moment, that single sharp echo of a breaking clay jar in the desert completely changed the landscape of biblical archaeology and biblical theology forever.
It gives you chills.
When the shepherds eventually lowered themselves into the cave, their eyes adjusting to the darkness, they didn't find the gold or jewels they probably hoped for.
Right, they found old jars.
They found rows of ancient, mysterious, cylindrical clay jars. Most of them were empty, filled only with centuries of dust, but a few had tightly sealed lids, shaped like bowls inverted over the top.
And what was inside?
Inside those specific jars were scrolls, meticulously wrapped in blackened, time-worn linen, smelling of ancient pitch and cedar oil.
Now, I want to pause here and really explore this because the journey these fragile scrolls took from that pitch-black cave to where they are today reads like a Hollywood script.
It really does.
I have to push back a little on the sheer physical reality of this. We are talking about animal skin, leather, and parchment.
Yes.
How on earth did these priceless, incredibly fragile organic texts survive 2,000 years? If I leave a leather jacket in a damp basement, it rats in a decade. How did these survive millennia?
It is the absolute definition of a physical miracle driven by geography and chemistry, and it speaks directly to our theme of faithfulness.
Okay, break down the science of it for us.
Well, the Judean desert near the Dead Sea is a unique microclimate. Because it is so far below sea level, the atmospheric pressure is different, and more importantly, the humidity is practically zero.
So it's bone dry.
There is almost no moisture in the air year-round. Moisture is the enemy of organic material. It breeds mold, bacteria, and decay. Right. By sealing the parchment in clay jars and placing them in deep, dry, undisturbed limestone caves, the Essene community essentially created a natural vacuum chamber. The leather didn't rot. It desiccated, it dried out completely, freezing the text in time.
Okay, so the desert protected them for 2 millennia. But the moment they leave the cave, they're thrust into one of the most volatile periods in modern history. The human element of their survival is just as wild as the climate.
Exactly. The Bedouin shepherds didn't know what they had. They saw old leather.
So what did they do with them?
They brought the scrolls back to their camp, where they hung them from a tent pole for weeks.
You're kidding.
Let that sink in. The greatest archaeological discovery in history, dangling from a desert tent.
Oh my goodness.
Eventually, they brought them to Bethlehem and sold them for a mere pittance equivalent to a few $dozen today to a local antiquities dealer and cobbler named Kundo.
So a shoe cobbler had them.
Yes. And Kundo, realizing they had some value, then sold 4 of the scrolls to Archbishop Samuel, the head of the Syrian Orthodox Church in Jerusalem.
Okay.
Meanwhile, Professor Eliezer Sukenik, an archaeologist at the Hebrew University, got wind of the discovery through a colleague. Keep in mind the exact historical moment.
Yeah.
This is late November, 1947.
Oh, wow. The British Mandate is ending. The United Nations is literally voting on the partition of Palestine. Jerusalem is an absolute tinderbox of Arab-Jewish tensions.
It was a war zone.
It was practically a war zone. The roads were blocked by militias, snipers were on the roofs, and the city was divided into military zones.
Yet, Professor Sukenik's dedication to the historical record, his holy awe for what these scrolls might be, was so profound that he took a terrifying risk.
What did he do?
He arranged a secret meeting with an Armenian dealer who had access to some of the scrolls. Because they couldn't cross the military checkpoints, they literally met through a barbed wire fence dividing a hostile zone in Jerusalem.
Or a fence.
Sukenik peered through the razor wire just so he could examine a tiny scrap of the parchment and verify the ancient Hebrew script. He risked a sniper's bullet to confirm the authenticity of the Word of God.
That image gives me chills. A scholar looking through barbed wire at the ancient words of the prophets, while a modern war erupts around him.
He recognized the antiquity of the script immediately and managed to purchase 3 of the scrolls for the university.
But Archbishop Samuel still has the other 4 scrolls. And because the 1948 Arab-Israeli war escalates, Samuel smuggles his 4 scrolls out of the country.
Right.
He takes them to the United States for safekeeping. And for years, they just sit in a bank vault in New York. The academic world knows they exist, but they are completely inaccessible.
Just waiting in a vault.
Until 1954, when Archbishop Samuel decides he needs to raise money and wants to sell them. And how does he do it? This is the part that blows my mind every time.
It's hilarious.
He places a classified ad in the Wall Street Journal. You cannot make this up. Mixed in with ads for real estate and used cars, there is an ad that reads, "Miscellaneous for sale. Biblical manuscripts dating back to at least 200 BC are for sale. This would be an ideal gift to an educational or religious institution by an individual or group."
It sounds absurd to our modern ears, but it highlights the profound providence of the situation. Who happened to be in the United States on a lecture tour at that exact moment?
I know, it's wild.
And who happened to have a contact who saw that specific ad, Yigal Yadin.
And tell everyone who Yadin was.
Yadin was a famous Israeli archaeologist, a former military chief of staff, and, incredibly, he was the son of Professor Eliezer Sukenik.
The same guy at the barbed wire fence.
The very same. Yadin recognized what the ad was referring to immediately. He knew these were the missing sister scrolls to the ones his father had purchased through the barbed wire.
So what was his next move?
Working through intermediaries to keep his identity hidden because the archbishop likely wouldn't have sold them directly to an Israeli official, Yadin managed to raise $250,000.
A fortune at the time.
A massive fortune. And he negotiated a discreet purchase to bring those 4 scrolls back to the state of Israel.
So out of chaos, out of a desert cave, through an antiquities dealer, across a war-torn city, smuggled across the ocean, and finally bought through a newspaper ad, the primary collection was brought back together in Jerusalem.
It's breathtaking.
And that initial discovery of those first 7 scrolls triggered a massive, frantic archaeological hunt. Bedouin and archaeologists were racing each other to explore every cliff face in the Dead Sea region.
Eventually uncovering roughly 900 manuscripts across 11 different caves.
It is a profound testament to God's faithfulness. The arid climate of the Dead Sea was the perfect vessel, hiding the texts away for 2 millennia exactly when they needed to be hidden, right before the Roman destruction of Judea.
Yes.
But equally profound is the faithfulness of the individuals who risked their lives, their finances, and their reputations to rescue and protect them in the 20th century.
I couldn't agree more.
Okay, so now we have these priceless treasures safe in Jerusalem. But that raises an entirely new, incredibly complex problem. How do we protect them?
Right, the conservation aspect.
How do you house a 2,000-year-old piece of animal skin that is suddenly exposed to modern air, modern light, and millions of tourists? This brings us to the crown jewel of the entire Qumran discovery. The Great Isaiah Scroll, known to scholars by its technical designation, 1Q Isa.
The Great Isaiah Scroll is unparalleled in the realm of archaeology. It is the only fully intact, completely preserved biblical scroll found at Qumran.
Because most of them are just fragments.
Right. Exactly. While other books survive in fragments, a chapter here, a few verses there, this scroll contains all 66 chapters of the book of Isaiah, from the first verse to the last.
That is just incredible.
To give you a sense of its physical presence, if you were to unroll it completely, it is 7.17 meters long. That is over 23 feet of continuous text.
And how was it actually made? We aren't talking about paper, right?
Not at all. It is constructed from 17 distinct sheets of carefully prepared parchment, which is processed animal skin, most likely sheep or goat.
Wow, 17 sheets.
These sheets were painstakingly sewn together with fine linen thread. The scribe then meticulously ruled the leather and wrote 54 columns of Hebrew text.
And how old is it exactly?
Through rigorous radiocarbon dating and paleographic analysis of the handwriting style, it is reliably dated to roughly 125 BCE.
125 BCE. I want you listening to really grasp the weight of that date. That means this exact physical object, this 23-foot leather scroll, existed, was unrolled, and was likely being read aloud in a community over a century before Jesus was even born.
Yes.
When Jesus stood up in the synagogue in Nazareth and was handed the scroll of Isaiah, he was reading from a document practically identical to this one. The thought of that physical connection is staggering.
It's beautiful.
So, to house this unparalleled treasure, the state of Israel built something truly spectacular. The Shrine of the Book, located at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem.
The architecture of the Shrine of the Book is a profound theological statement in itself. It is not just a building designed to hold artifacts.
Right, it's highly symbolic.
Designed by architects Armand Bartos and Frederick Kiesler, the building is a symbolic landscape that tells the story of the scrolls. The most prominent feature as you approach the museum is a striking, stark white dome that seems to rise organically out of the ground.
And that shape isn't just for aesthetics.
No, the shape of this dome is not random. It is modeled exactly on the lids of the specific clay jars in which the first scrolls were found in the Qumran caves.
And right next to this brilliant white dome, there is a massive contrasting black basalt wall that cuts across the plaza.
Yes, and that stark contrast is entirely intentional. It represents the specific dualistic theology of the Essene community at Qumran who preserved these scrolls.
The sons of light and darkness.
Exactly. In their writings, they viewed the world as a cosmic, ongoing battleground between good and evil, specifically between what they called the sons of light, represented by the white dome, and the sons of darkness, represented by the heavy black wall.
The attention to detail is amazing.
Even the physical act of entering the building is an immersive experience. You don't just walk through a set of glass doors. You descend into a dark, subterranean corridor surrounded by rough stone walls, which evokes the visceral feeling of descending into the very caves where the scrolls were hidden for 2 millennia.
And at the center of this facility is Hajat Mouse, the dedicated director and curator who oversees this incredibly delicate, high-stakes environment.
Yes, her work is critical.
And our sources reveal some incredibly exciting news regarding Hajat Mouse's work. We are approaching the Israel Museum's 60th anniversary in 2026. For the first time in 60 years, the museum is displaying the entire original Great Isaiah Scroll in an exhibit beautifully titled Comfort from the Desert.
This is a massive deal.
Right, because usually if you visit the museum, you're looking at a high-quality facsimile or perhaps only a very small rotated fragment of the original. They keep the original locked in dark vaults because it is profoundly sensitive to environmental changes.
The conservation measures required to make this complete exhibition happen are monumentally complex. You cannot simply place a 2,000-year-old parchment in a glass display box, turn on the gallery lights, and invite the public in.
What would happen if they did?
If you did that, the ambient humidity, the fluctuations in temperature, and the ultraviolet radiation from the lights would cause the collagen in the animal skin to rapidly degrade. The ink would fade, the parchment would warp, and the text would be lost within a generation.
The sources describe the setup they had to engineer, and honestly, it sounds more like a spacecraft's life support system than a museum display.
It pretty much is.
They couldn't use standard museum cases. They had to custom order a massive 8-meter-long, 3-layer, bulletproof glass case, which had to be specially imported from a manufacturer in Belgium.
Wow.
Inside this hermetically sealed case, the microenvironment is strictly controlled down to the decimal point. The climate system maintains exactly 48% humidity and exactly 19 degrees Celsius, 24 hours a day, regardless of the weather outside in Jerusalem.
And the lighting protocol is even more intense. The lighting is kept exceptionally low, only illuminating the scroll when visitors are present.
I read about the time limit, too.
Yes. In fact, To prevent the cumulative degradation caused by human breath, body heat, and the tiny amount of light exposure required to see the text, the museum has instituted a strict protocol. Visitors are only allowed inside the viewing room for exactly 7 minutes.
7 minutes. You get your 7 minutes of the prophet, and then you have to leave to protect the artifact.
Yeah.
It deeply highlights the reverence with which these artifacts are treated. We are protecting the physical incarnation of ancient prophecy.
It is a massive, multi-million-dollar effort just to keep the leather and ink stable.
But having the physical artifact is only half the story. As amazing as the leather is, the vital question for our faith and for biblical scholarship is this: what does the text actually say?
That is the crux of the matter. We have a pristine physical object, but what is its spiritual and historical payload?
Exactly. Does it match our Bibles today? If I open my English Bible, or a modern Hebrew Bible, to Isaiah chapter 53, the prophecy of the suffering servant, is it the same text that the Essenes were reading at Qumran in 125 BCE?
We have to move the conversation from the chemistry of the parchment to the actual linguistics of the words written on it.
Right.
This is where we delve into the rigorous scientific and linguistic analysis of the text. When scholars first unrolled the Great Isaiah Scroll and began reading it, they specifically looked to the research of Professor Yechezkel Kutcher, one of the most renowned linguists of ancient Hebrew.
And what did he find?
And what he found initially caused a massive wave of debate. He noticed thousands of tiny differences between the Great Isaiah Scroll and the traditional Masoretic text, which is the authoritative Hebrew text that forms the basis of our modern Old Testaments.
Okay, we need to unpack those differences deeply because this is where the rubber meets the road for anyone who trusts the Bible. The sources note that the Qumran scroll uses what scholars call plene spelling. Could you explain what that means?
Certainly. Ancient classical Hebrew, like many Semitic languages, is written primarily using consonants. The vowels are inferred by the reader based on context and fluency.
Right, which sounds so hard to read.
It is, if you aren't fluent. However, plene spelling, which translates to full spelling, is a system where the scribe intentionally inserts extra consonant letters, specifically letters like vav or yod, to function as vowels. They essentially added reading aids to help the reader know exactly how to pronounce the word.
So they were modifying the spelling to make it easier to read aloud. What else did Kutcher find?
He found heavy Aramaic influences creeping into the Hebrew text. For example, instead of spelling the name of the city of Damascus the traditional classical Hebrew way, which is Damesek, the scribe of this scroll spelled it Darmasek, which is the distinct Aramaic pronunciation.
Oh, interesting.
Furthermore, Kutcher noted that the scribe frequently shortened certain theological names. Instead of the older, longer, more formal biblical form Uziyahu, the scroll simply reads Uzziah.
And didn't they also change actual vocabulary words?
Yes, and this was the most startling discovery. The scribe frequently replaced difficult, rare, archaic Hebrew words with much more common contemporary words that were used in the daily life of the 2nd century BCE.
Do we have an example of that?
The academic sources give a perfect example. There is a rare ancient biblical word used for the hem or train of a garment, the word shovel. The scribe of the Great Isaiah Scroll completely removed shovel and replaced it with the much more common, everyday Mishnaic Hebrew word shulaim, which everyone in the street would immediately understand.
Now, I have to step in here and formulate the critical question, especially for you listening who hold the Bible as the inspired, unalterable Word of God.
It's a fair question.
I'm looking at these spelling changes Kutcher found, adding vowels, changing names to Aramaic slang, swapping out difficult vocabulary. If I were a skeptic, I'd look at this data and say, see, we have proof. The text was fluid. People were editing it to suit their needs. The scribes were just changing words whenever they felt like it. How do we bridge the gap between a scribe casually updating the word for hem and the idea of flawless, faithful biblical preservation? Doesn't this prove the argument that the Bible was altered over time?
It is the most vital question we can ask, and on the surface, looking only at the Great Isaiah Scroll, one might understandably think exactly that. But here is where Professor Kutcher's deeper, masterful linguistic analysis completely turns that skeptical argument on its head.
How so?
By analyzing why these specific changes were made, he concluded that these alterations were not corruptions of a sacred master text. Instead, they prove that the Great Isaiah Scroll, 1 Qiuza, was created to serve a very specific practical purpose. It was what scholars call a vulgar or popular reading copy.
A popular copy. What does that mean in a modern context? like a paraphrased study Bible.
I like to use a functional analogy to explain this. It is the difference between a pristine, massive, leather-bound King James Bible that is kept strictly on a church altar and a heavily highlighted, dog-eared, modern language study Bible that a student carries in their backpack.
Oh, I see.
The altar Bible is meant for absolute, authoritative preservation of the exact traditional language. The backpack Bible is meant for daily reading, study, and immediate accessibility.
Right.
By the 2nd century BCE, classical biblical Hebrew was dying out as the spoken language of the common Jewish people in the street. They spoke Aramaic, the lingua franca of the region.
So when they went to the synagogue, they couldn't understand the ancient Hebrew being read.
Exactly. Reading classical unvoweled Hebrew was becoming incredibly difficult for the average person. So the scribes who produced the Great Isaiah Scroll intentionally added those vowel markers, updated the Aramaic spelling, and simplified the archaic vocabulary specifically to make the prophecies of Isaiah accessible to the common people.
Wow.
It was an educational study edition, a backpack Bible, meant for reading aloud in a world that was rapidly losing its fluency in the language of the patriarchs.
Oh, that completely shifts the paradigm. It wasn't that the original perfect text was lost or casually corrupted. The scribes were performing a pastoral duty. They were translating and adapting a study copy so their congregation could actually understand the Word of God.
Precisely. And here is the definitive, earth-shattering proof that secures the absolute reliability of Scripture. If the Great Isaiah Scroll was the backpack Bible, where was the altar Bible? Did it exist?
Did they find it?
The answer is a resounding yes. Scholars didn't just find one Isaiah scroll at Qumran. In Cave 1, they found another, slightly less complete scroll, known as the smaller Isaiah scroll, designated 1 Qusab. Furthermore, over the following decades, archaeologists found dozens of fragments of other biblical books at Qumran and at other remote desert fortresses like Masada, where Jewish rebels held out against the Romans, and the caves of Marabaat.
And what did those other scrolls, the altar Bibles, look like? When the scholars rolled those out, what did they find?
When scholars compared the text of the smaller Isaiah scroll and those strict fortress fragments to the traditional Masoretic text, specifically the Leningrad Codex, which is the complete Hebrew Bible dating to the Middle Ages, over a full millennium later, the results left the academic world stunned.
What were the results?
They were absolutely identical.
Wait.
Identical.
Down to the very letter, down to the exact spelling, the exact consonants, and even the identical paragraph breaks and spacing on the page.
I want to make sure we are grasping the magnitude of this. We are talking about over 1,000 years of history, 1,000 years of wars, exiles, empires rising and falling, and texts being painstakingly copied by hand, by candlelight, generation after generation.
That's right.
And the text of Isaiah didn't change by a single consonant.
It did not. This is our theme of faithfulness, applied directly to hard archaeological evidence. Professor Emanuel Tov, one of the foremost globally recognized experts on the Dead Sea Scrolls, noted his absolute astonishment at this fact.
It's hard to even fathom. Texts from the 3rd century BCE match medieval texts perfectly. It proves the existence of a highly organized, deeply devoted class of scribes who copied the authoritative texts with what can only be described as holy awe.
I've read about the rules these scribes had to follow. It wasn't just casual copying.
It was an act of profound worship and rigorous mathematics. The scribes of the Masoretic tradition counted every single letter in a book. They knew exactly which letter was the middle of the scroll.
And if they made a mistake?
If they made a single mistake in copying, if a pen slipped, if 2 letters touched, if a word was misspelled, they didn't just cross it out. They would take the entire panel of expensive parchment, declare it unfit for sacred use, and bury it in a geniza, a sacred repository.
Wow.
The exactness of this transmission over millennia proves the strictness of the Masoretic tradition. It is scientific, historical proof of divine faithfulness in preserving prophecy.
That is incredibly powerful for the believer. When you read the prophecies of Isaiah today, when you read about the virgin birth, or the suffering servant, or the promise of a coming kingdom, you can have absolute confidence in your heart.
Absolutely.
You are not reading a game of historical telephone that has been distorted over centuries. You are reading the exact, precise words that were preserved by those faithful scribes in the desert 2,000 years ago. Our confidence in the Bible isn't just blind faith. It is backed by rigorous archaeological and linguistic science.
It truly fortifies the soul. And speaking of science, the way we interact with these texts today is a remarkable story all its own. The ancients preserved the word in clay jars in dark caves, counting letters by hand.
Yeah, and now look at us.
Right. Today, we are preserving and reading it using pixels, complex algorithms, artificial intelligence, and X-rays. We have moved from the era of physical preservation into the era of digital immortality.
The technological leap is astounding. Our sources detail the incredible Google digitization project. Google partnered with the Israel Museum to take these fragile scrolls out of their dark vaults and make them accessible to anyone in the world with a smartphone or an internet connection.
But the challenge was, how do you photograph an artifact that degrades when exposed to light in a high enough resolution to be useful to scholars?
The technical specifications on the camera setup they built are mind-blowing. To photograph the scrolls without damaging them, they couldn't just use a standard studio camera. They engineered a custom 1200 megapixel camera system.
That's massive.
To put that in perspective, the camera on a high-end smartphone is usually around 12 to 48 megapixels. This was a 1200 megapixel beast. And to protect the ancient iron gall ink and the delicate parchment from light degradation, the strobe flash was equipped with heavy UV protection filters and fired at a staggering exposure speed of 1/4000th of a second. It exposed the scroll to light for just a fraction of a millisecond, but it captured details that the human eye simply cannot see, right down to the pores of the animal skin.
And by making those massive, high-resolution digital files available to researchers worldwide, it allowed for entirely new types of analysis that were previously impossible. For instance, artificial intelligence has recently been applied to the handwriting in the Great Isaiah Scroll.
Really? What did the AI find?
For decades, paleographers debated whether the massive 23-foot scroll was written by one highly skilled scribe who worked on it for months, or if it was a team effort by multiple people. The human eye couldn't tell the difference.
Right, because if you look at the columns, the handwriting looks completely uniform from chapter 1 to chapter 66.
Exactly. But researchers fed the high-resolution images into AI machine learning algorithms. The algorithm wasn't just looking at the shape of the letters, it was analyzing the microscopic variations in how the letters were formed.
Like what?
The exact angle of the pen strokes, the pressure applied to the parchment, the tiny sub-millimeter curves that are unique to human biomechanics. And the AI proved conclusively that the Great Isaiah Scroll was written by two different scribes. The transition happens right around chapter 33.
That is fascinating. But if it was two different people, why did the AI have to find it? Why was their handwriting so incredibly similar that scholars missed it for 70 years?
Because it reveals something profound about the social structure of the scribes. Their handwriting was nearly identical because they were trained in the exact same scribal school.
Ah.
They learned to write in a highly disciplined, institutionalized environment. It wasn't just one rogue genius copying a text. It was a highly collaborative, deeply trained community effort dedicated solely to the flawless transmission of the word. The AI allowed us to peer over the shoulders of these two anonymous scribes working together 2 millennia ago.
That is the perfect blend of ancient devotion and modern tech. But if you want to talk about high-tech archaeology performing absolute miracles, we have to talk about the En-Gedi scroll. This is, without a doubt, one of my favorite stories from all of our sources today.
Oh, it's a phenomenal story.
Because it brings everything we've talked about, fire, preservation, faithfulness, and technology, into one singular moment.
The En-Gedi scroll is a masterpiece of modern science rescuing ancient tragedy. Let's set the scene. It is 1965. Archaeologists are excavating the ruins of an ancient Jewish synagogue in the beautiful desert oasis of En-Gedi, located on the western shore of the Dead Sea.
Okay.
During the excavations, they discovered that the synagogue had been entirely destroyed by a massive catastrophic fire, likely around the year 600 CE, during a period of intense historical upheaval and persecution.
Right.
Inside the scorched ruins of the Holy Ark, the focal point of the synagogue where the scriptures were kept, they found the remains of a Torah scroll.
But it didn't look like a scroll at all, did it? When I look at the pictures of it, it literally looks like a lump of charcoal from a campfire.
It was completely carbonized. The intense heat of the synagogue fire had baked the animal skin, melting the layers together into a solid charred lump of ash. For 46 years, it sat in the protective vaults of the Israel Antiquities Authority.
Because they couldn't open it.
It was a known artifact, but it was universally considered impossible to open. If a conservator even touched it with a scalpel or a soft brush, the brittle ash would instantly crumble into useless dust.
So it was just stuck.
Yes. It was an artifact that scholars knew contained the Word of God, but they believed it would remain utterly silent forever, a casualty of history.
Enter modern medical imaging. Penina Shore, the brilliant director of the Dead Sea Scrolls Project at the Antiquities Authority, refused to give up on it.
She had vision, that's for sure.
She teamed up with Professor Brent Seals, a renowned computer scientist from the University of Kentucky, and they decided to take a radical approach. They took this 2,000-year-old piece of fragile charcoal to a hospital, and they put it inside an advanced medical CT scanner.
It sounds like science fiction, but the physics behind it is beautiful. The same X-ray technology used to look inside the human body to map tumors was used to look inside the body of this ancient text.
It's just wild to think about.
The CT scanner bombarded the lump of ash with X-rays, mapping its internal structure in incredibly precise three-dimensional slices. But you have to ask, how does the scanner distinguish between the burnt parchment and the ink when both are essentially just carbon now?
That is the crucial question. How does an algorithm read letters inside a solid block of ash?
It relies on ancient chemistry. Ancient scribes often mix their ink with heavy metallic elements like iron, lead, or copper to make it bind to the leather. Because metal is much denser than carbonized animal skin, the CT scanner's X-rays bounce off the microscopic deposits of metallic ink differently than they bounce off the burnt parchment. The X-rays create a density map.
That is brilliant.
So Professor Seals' team developed incredibly complex software algorithms that didn't just look for letters. They looked for these microscopic metallic deposits suspended inside the 3D block of ash.
Wow.
The software mathematically flattened the layers of the scroll, and then, pixel by pixel, on a computer screen, they virtually unrolled the ash.
Just imagine being in that laboratory room in Jerusalem. For the first time in over 1,000 years, humans are looking at the text hidden inside this burnt lump. The sources tell us that when leading biblical scholars like Professor Michael Segal and Professor Emmanuel Tov were called in to actually read the digital text that emerged on the glowing computer screen, they were absolutely stunned.
And were brought to tears.
Because of what they were reading. As the digital text materialized, they realized it was the book of Leviticus, starting with the very first chapter.
It's beautiful.
And once again, powerfully validating everything we just discussed about the strict Masoretic tradition, the text inside that burnt ash matched the medieval Masoretic text perfectly. Not just the spelling of the words, but right down to the exact paragraph breaks, the spacing between the letters, and the layout of the columns.
There is such beautiful, profound, poetic justice here. I want you to think about this. Fire and time, the ultimate forces of destruction in our world, tried to obliterate the word in that synagogue. The people who burned that building wanted to erase that community and their faith.
But they couldn't.
But modern digital light X-rays and pixels pierced through the ash and revealed the text completely intact. It's a literal physical fulfillment of the prophet Isaiah's words. The grass withers and the flowers fade, but the word of our God stands forever.
It's undeniable.
It confirms the faith of millions in a way that is visually, scientifically, and historically undeniable.
It perfectly encapsulates our entire journey today. If we look back at the path we have walked, we started with a small silver-plated coin washing up on a sandy beach, grounding the biblical narrative in the hard, complex economic realities of the Persian period.
Right.
We saw the geopolitical pressures that drove faithful men to the desert. We moved to a simple stone thrown by a Bedouin boy into a dark cave, leading to the miraculous preservation of the Dead Sea Scrolls through wars and black markets.
An incredible journey.
We analyzed the meticulous, holy awe of the ancient scribes in Qumran, proven by rigorous textual comparison. And finally, we saw artificial intelligence and medical scanners resurrecting burnt ashes, all pointing to one undeniable foundational conclusion.
The unbroken, faithfully preserved chain of God's word.
And as we close our deep dive today, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought from our sources to ponder on your own. Thousands of miles away from the blistering heat of the Judean desert, in the heart of modern secular power, stands the United Nations building in New York City. And inscribed on a massive stone wall right across from that global institution where the nations of the world gather to debate war and peace are the words from the second chapter of the book of Isaiah. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore.
It is a profound irony and a deeply beautiful truth. The modern secular world, in its highest global institutions, in its desperate, ongoing search for meaning, justice, and peace, reaches for this exact, perfectly preserved 2,000-year-old text to articulate humanity's greatest hope. The words that were hidden in a jar, the words that were analyzed by AI, are the words the world still looks to.
The Word hasn't just survived in a desert cave. It continues to speak powerfully to the heart of the world today. It is living, active, and perfectly preserved. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe and follow the Holy Land Path on this platform so you never miss a discovery.
Until next time, keep walking the ancient paths. God bless you.